To think that all of the crap that you have gone through in your life, the pain that you've processed, what you've endured is not for nothing. It's here to also serve a higher purpose, a higher good. And I'm never going to be someone to say, oh, it's such a blessing that everything that's happened to me happened for a reason. I don't wish what has happened to me in my childhood and in my life on another person, but it was supposed to happen for the greater good, for the message, for the story, in order to help others heal. And that's why it's so important for at any capacity for us to share our stories. That doesn't mean you have to make it into a business like my guest today, but keeping quiet about your story and holding yourself back when you know you have something more to give and share with people is doing such a great service, not just to yourself, but to the greater good of your fellow person. So many of us are sitting here struggling alone, sitting in silence, feeling like we're the only one. And you can be the reason why someone doesn't feel alone today, why someone feels seen, heard, and understood. And what a beautiful blessing that is. And you're going to hear a beautiful example of my client and certified ganjier and journalist, Shelley Peebles. She doesn't just have a fun name, she's a really fun person who's gone through a lot of stuff, a horrible, toxic divorce, which ended up showing up as debilitating pain that almost ended her career in her body and all that she went through to try to heal. And that entire journey that she endured ended up being the business that she was meant to have all along and to help the people who she was supposed to help all along with this beautiful natural medicine that gets such a bad rap. And whether you're someone who is open to plant medicine or you think it's a horrible, evil thing, or you're somewhere in between, I just ask that you listen to this and be open minded because we have lots of prescriptions and lots of unregulated supplements that all of us have spent a fortune on. And there's medicines that come right from the earth that, when used properly, have helped people heal in tremendous ways. And I'm one of them. So just keep an open mind and share this episode with someone who you know might really benefit from learning about this wisdom today. There's always a way to heal.
If you're tired of hearing the same old basic mindset and motivational fluff talk, you've come to the right show. Welcome to Project Me with Tiffany Carter, the podcast, where we dish on everything from managing that crazy brain of yours to manifesting abundance to my straightforward, actionable steps that will make you major money online. Now, I'm not your typical multimillionaire entrepreneur. It takes a small village to keep my anxiety and depression in check. I'm inherently disorganized with an intense obsession with office supplies. Your girl here is a digital marketing content expert who's generated over $200 million in sales. I promise by tuning in twice a week, you will get a much needed refreshing dose of truth, clarity, and cash making advice. Now let's get to it.
What up, my people, my posse, my fellow crazies? It's your host, Tiffany Carter, and this is the show that is going to help you grow your business, your bank account, your abundance, that big, beautiful brain of yours, your relationships, and everything in between. So, yeah, this episode is going to be wild into the world of weed, but where I really wanted to start with my guest today and client of mine is what's so powerful about you and what makes you so unique is your story that got you into this. So let's first explain to the people, because when you first came to me, I'm a certified ganjier. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And we all know I'm very pro THC and I live in Los Angeles. Okay. I've heard of a lot of things. And she's like, it's like a sommelier, but for weed. I was like, this is the thing. It's so exciting. What made you go this in depth with it? Because to get a certification and to really go all in with it versus being someone who maybe is an investor in weed businesses, or maybe you're someone who makes products of your own on the side or whatever. You decided like, this is going to be my life, my brand, my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was so I had tried cannabis in college and I was very much on board with getting legalization happening, but I really liked weed, but it wasn't something that was really conducive to being a parent. I felt like once I became a mom, I should stay away from this plant. It was not as normal, I would say, right? Like it was more hush hush. People didn't talk about it. And I lived in this very small conservative town. And then I ended up going through a very rough divorce and I was having a lot of just health problems. I was really very active at one point in my life. And I just got to a point where I couldn't even hold myself up to do a push up. I would just kind of fall to the ground and I was in a lot of pain, just I had pain going all the way down to my arm, and my fingers were numb. And I'm a dental hygienist. And I was trying to go to all these different doctors and figure out what was wrong with me. And somewhere along the way, I ended up in an orthopedic doctor's office, and they told me that I should probably think about getting a different career.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I was facing knowing that I couldn't probably survive on the income that I had as a single parent. I knew I wasn't going to get child support. And I was being told that I should find a different career in my late 30s, early 40s. Yeah. So it was a lot to take in. And I was given this protocol of steroids and muscle relaxers and painkillers. And I just really couldn't function with all of that medication. And I couldn't take it and work, but it was also painful to do my job without medication. And so I started looking at different options. I went on a girls trip to Colorado and took some gummies, and that was really kind of what did it. I slept for 8 hours in a row and I woke up and I felt amazing. And so from there, it just opened up this kind of just curiosity on my part. And I started just educating myself on this plant and just decided to get the certification. And I decided I was going to open up a CBD dispensary in my small town, which was interesting in itself.
Quick break to give you something for free that is a perfect complement to this episode. So, one of the things that really has helped me truly heal and get me such clarity and feel so grounded and connected in life, and has helped my sleep, has helped me generate more abundance, are my guided walking meditations. I take my abundance walks typically twice a day. They are designed to get you out of fear and scarcity and shift back into the abundance zone in less than 3 minutes. And no, you don't have to do them every day, but you can. But even 3 days a week would be incredible. And if you can't walk, as long as you're doing some form of movement, they absolutely work. You can get them by going to projectmewithtiffany.com/season of abundance. I've put them right inside the show notes of today's episode, so you can swipe up. And if you're watching here on YouTube, the link is right in the description. Couple that with some of the things that you are learning in this episode. And if you're someone who is into using plant medicine, you combine these two things. Not only will you likely have a euphoric experience, but you're going to get such incredible downloads from a whole nother dimension from your higher self that will absolutely blow your mind. You just got to trust me on this. So go grab it. So let's go back to some of your symptoms, because so many people listening to this show have been through trauma, have had toxic relationships, toxic divorces, where they've ended up in burnout, where their hormones are totally out of whack, have had a lot of chronic pain. Can you go back to that time of what started happening, like the early onset of the symptoms, and what you thought it may have been, and different things that you tried? along the way?
Yeah. Yeah. Initially, it was the discomfort in my shoulder that kind of alerted me that something was wrong. And it was one of those just discomfort kind of pains. It wasn't bad, but it did progressively get worse to where I ended up with my fingers being numb and that sort of thing. And then from there, it was like I was doing the physical therapy. I was going to the physical therapist. I was taking the medication that they gave me. It was kind of touching the pain, but it wasn't really completely getting rid of it. And I remember being in my physical therapist's office, and the therapist was like, your body doesn't know the difference between physical pain and emotional pain. She was like, it all manifests as pain and inflammation in your body.
Wow.
And that just really kind of hit me. And she kind of knew what I was going through and dealing with. And she said, your divorce being so stressful is really probably what triggered this pain that you're having. She said, you probably already had this going on. And it was just kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And once I was able to really get my nervous system, I think, to relax and calm down, my body was able to actually start to heal.
Do you feel that using THC is what was one of the main things that helped regulate your nervous system?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Can you
Absolutely.
explain to us like how that works? Because some people would go, well, couldn't you just have met or maybe even have had like, I don't know, some kind of supplement or that you could take or
Right.
maybe like have cacao at night?
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned that because I did so many things on my journey, I guess, of self discovery because I was trying to heal myself. I went vegan for 4 months and I hired an integrated medicine doctor. I got all the supplements that he recommended that I take.
Which were like $5,000 worth, I'm sure.
Oh, it was ridiculous. And I mean, he did like work within a budget and give me basically like the most important things, but it was still a pretty long list of stuff. And the diet was pretty extreme. I personally really like meat. I see value in eating lots of fruits and vegetables, but it was just really hard. And being in a small town, I didn't have access to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. And there were no real vegan restaurants or places to get a lot of the ingredients. So it was really difficult for me to stay on track. But I did it for 4 months. I stuck with it. And it wasn't really changing anything for me. It didn't really help me. I did yoga therapy training I think I have over 1,000 hours of yoga therapy training. And I learned the breathing techniques and I learned the yoga poses and the things that I can do to help heal my body. And it did help, but I feel like if I had had cannabis integrated in or any other plant medicine, like integrated into all of everything else that I was doing, it would have been exponentially better and faster progress.
Did you feel let down by the medical system during
Yeah.
this time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my doctors were talking about long-term pain management, which meant sending me to a pain specialist where they basically just give you a list of medications to take. And a lot of that stuff left me feeling foggy, or at some point, it didn't work the way it was supposed to. Which I think we build up a tolerance not only to medications, but also to cannabis. But the nice thing about cannabis is that it's not habit forming and it's easier to navigate and figure out what works for you without forming some sort of addiction or habit.
Why do you think there is such a resistance still of so many people to plant medicine? Like there's still like this stigma to going for the plant medicine. Do you think it is lack of education on how to use it? Or is it because they had a bad experience with it one time in high school?
Maybe a little bit of all of those things. I think the biggest factor or underlying factor is fear. And there's fear of how people are going to react, right? But there's also this fear of getting caught with it because of the taboo and legalization laws. It just depends on where you are.
You were at a point where you exhausted all options. You had this incredible, clearly divine intervention on your girls' trip in Colorado. And you were at a point, it sounds like, where that didn't matter. You had to take your health in your own hands no matter what.
Yeah. And I've always been the kind of person that like I'll make my own laundry detergent. I like to grow my own vegetables. I like to have a garden and make things from scratch. I started making my kids baby food when they were little, and making sure that we know what's being put into our bodies. I feel like is important. So I think that's what sent me on that little excursion or rabbit hole of learning more about this plant. And the gummies that I took when I was in Colorado were made with a hash rosin, and they were delicious and they worked so well. I started wanting to learn all about it, and I wanted to learn how to make these myself. So that's really, I think, the spark that sent me off on this path. And that's how I found the Ganjier program. I started learning more about hash rosin and traditional hash, how you make it. I started watching all these YouTube videos, following a guy named Frenchy Cannoli. And I found out that he had been an instructor or was an instructor for this new Ganjier program, which was a cannabis. And I wanted to learn more from the people that had been through it since the beginning of time, like they're generational farmers and industry experts that know everything there is to know about cannabis, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
What would you say is some of like the biggest misconceptions, misinformation that you've heard from people just in speaking to them about like what you do or clients of yours?
I think for me, I see a lot of people not really knowing what quality is. As far as terminology goes, there's a lot of terminology that gets scientific. And I think the biggest thing for me really is the THC content. I think a lot of people think the higher the THC, the better. And a lot of people, especially younger crowds, they tend to want to just get high. And that's really not what it's all about. It's more of an experience and what combination of different cannabinoids are going to work for you and for your body. And everybody's different. We all have an endocannabinoid system that responds to all the different stressors in our day to day. And if we don't have that in balance, we see disease. And
so it's a cannabinoid? Is that how you say it? So what is, we make up words here and mispronounce things. What does that mean? I've heard the term, but it sounds very smart. I don't understand what it means.
So there are different compounds in the plant that are found naturally, and different cannabinoids do different things. And we're starting to learn a lot more about the plant, and research is getting more up there, but there's still a lot we don't know.
Right now, what's out there, as someone who is a consumer, and like we were talking before we started recording, really, I was self-medicating for my PTSD, even without realizing it. I am not someone who is a substance addict. I don't get addicted to things like that. So even when I was like, let's say in high school and college, and I was doing it to get high, but when I look back, what I was really doing it for is I finally felt regulated. And like you said, I got a better quality of sleep.
And you needed
that. Right. Like I needed some help with that. And I'm still medicated. I'm on an antidepressant now, and I do the breath work and I do the yoga, and I appreciate you sharing all the things that you did beforehand. I did equine therapy, art therapy.
Yeah.
All those things are beautiful and tools. But really, I would say there is nothing that has helped calm my nervous system, help me even out my brain than utilizing THC. But I have to be honest, even as someone who is a consumer and lives in an area that is, I can get anything literally delivered to me on a bicycle right now. But here's all I know. And this means that so many people listening, they either know what I know or they know a lot less. There's, and I'm going to mispronounce it, so please correct me. There's sativa. Is that how you say it?
Sativa.
Sativa, and then there's indica, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's hybrids.
Yep.
Those are the only three strains that I
Well,
think
so
exist.
we're talking about weed, we categorize it in types. So type 1 would be your THC dominant, type 2 would be your hybrid, and then type 3 would be more like CBD. So depending on the percentages of how much THC is in that plant is how we categorize it.
How do you know where to start? Like, I know this is something that you offer in terms of like consulting services with people. So, you guys, I'm going to have all of her info in the show notes in the description here on YouTube, and you can DM her on Instagram for that. That's the best way right now. But someone getting started, let's say someone has ADHD, there's someone who's an overthinker, overanalyzer, they can't turn their brain off. How do they know where to start? Because what ends up happening is someone gives someone a gummy or someone
Mhm.
has had a half of a pot brownie, and sometimes it's way too strong for them, or maybe it's not the right type for them. And then they can have a bad experience. And they're like, oh, it doesn't work for me. This type of plant medicine doesn't work for me. But that would be like someone saying, I hate wine, and all you've tried is some cheap ass white Zinfandel, right?
Yep.
I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
that's, you just
Exactly.
you haven't had the proper, I guess you could call it, type or what symptom relief or what you're looking for. So where is a good place for people to start?
So I like to usually just start with what their level of consumption experience is up to that point that we're having this conversation. Like, what have they tried? Have they tried topicals or edibles or smokable products? There's so many different ways we can consume this plant. So I'd like to kind of get an idea of what their experience level is, what they've tried, and how that affected them. And I like bringing in the aspect of the yoga with a client because then I can kind of also see what's going on in their body. Because and in yoga, we talk about meeting people where they are. And if somebody is ADHD and they are still currently going through a lot of trauma, it's going to be a lot harder for them to sit still and do anything for more than probably a few minutes. If we can find a way to, like, for instance, quickly bring their endocannabinoid system into balance, we would probably look at something like flower because that's going to activate a lot faster. It's going to be more effective quicker. It's a quicker onset and it's easier to do. And if they need help more with like sleep, I would probably steer them towards some sort of edible. But again, we want to know, have they tried an edible before? If so, how much was that? How many milligrams were in that edible? And see what their experience was.
Yeah, because an edible, which is where I've noticed people have gotten in trouble, and I certainly have. I will never forget the brownie experience I had on an airplane where you do not want to take too much THC and be on an airplane. Like, this was not fun. It's harder to dose, like you said. And I went, and I know a lot of people have done this. Oh, I don't like feel anything yet. So then you have a little more. But the reason why my guess is you're suggesting an edible for sleep is because it takes longer in your system to go through your system, which is helps you stay asleep longer. And it's harder to dose because you could take a gummy and one person maybe just ate a big meal or metabolizes differently. It affects one person so much different than another person. So if someone's doing an edible, would you always say, like, let's start less is more?
Yes, yeah. We say start low and go slow because 2 milligrams for one person can be very different for another person. So you have to look at the dosage, right? And see, because there could be 50 milligrams of THC, which is quite a bit. And for some people, that's fine. But if you're wanting a lesser of an effect, you might want maybe more like 10. So you kind of have to figure that out. But we also want to look at where setting is what we talk about too. So where are you going to be consuming your cannabis and what kind of activities are you going to be doing that day?
Ooh, this is such a great point. Okay, so let me take you through a couple common scenarios that
Okay.
I know my peeps, I know my listeners, what they go through. Okay, so scenario one, and this is not replacing you guys doing like a customized consultation with her, because obviously I don't know everyone's particular nuances. So we're doing generals here. But let's say it is the multi-passionate ADHD. I need to get work done, create content. I'm working on my business during the day, and I have to do multitasking, and I need to stay focused so I can actually get stuff done. And I have such a hard time with it, person. And they're going to be like, they're not necessarily, maybe they do have to run errands later in the day. So at some point, they might have to get into a car, but most of the day, they're going to be like in an office setting.
Yeah, I know people that can function really well on taking bong hits or dabs, and that's fine for them. Personally, I can't. So during the daytime, my protocol is a lot different. I'm consuming more CBD type product. I feel like you're talking about me.
As every single person who listens to the show and reads the emails. Well, let me stop you there really quick because I got to be honest with you. Maybe you can sell me on it. I'm
Mhm.
not, I've really not, maybe I don't know what to do. The CBD thing's very confusing to me because I never really feel anything and I don't get it. So, what is the difference?
CBD is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid and it works with the other cannabinoids and does do certain things. So CBD is really great for inflammation and it is really good for relaxing the endocannabinoid system, but without producing like a psychoactive high.
So meaning I might not consciously go, "Oh, I feel a little different."
Right.
I won't have that feeling. It's almost like taking a Tylenol.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
But again, everybody's different. I know people that can take just CBD and they feel like super relaxed. And then you could give that same amount of CBD to somebody else and they might not feel anything like you.
So
You were
you would say like if you're someone during the day, you would start sowing more likely on CBD products and see
Mhm.
how that works for them first
Yeah.
before you would go to THC for the day. Because if you go to a dispensary and you know how they have people at the dispensary who will help you, but these are not ganjiers, you guys. Unless they say they're a certified ganjier, they're not a ganjier. There's some high 22-year-old who's like, I'm not saying they don't know stuff, but like, just know that I've gone in there before and I'll say that, and they'll go, "Oh, you need an indica then." Because that's more, I guess, the indica is more of a variety that is, I don't know, activating, if that's the right term, than it is a sedative. And that's
Yeah.
as far
Yeah.
as they go. So let's say, okay, you tell people, okay, start with a CBD product and see how that goes. And if they're like, that's not enough for me, it's not doing anything, would you have them go down like the indica path?
Possibly. I would also want to look at some other things like looking at their just day to day, how they operate. Are they waking up early in the morning or do they sleep till 10? Do they consume coffee? Because that I feel like kind of affects things as well. Caffeine. But so during the day, there's a lot of different things at play. At night, our routine tends to drop off and we're ready to relax. And that's when THC really comes into play, I feel like.
Interesting. That's not what I anticipated you saying. And I think a lot of people listening probably feel the same way because like, and this again, there's a stigma, right? I'm thinking
Right.
someone who does what you do for a living and in your brand and in your business, that you would be like THC at all times.
You would think, but it doesn't always work that way for everybody. And I mean, I know for me personally, I have to be very on point during the day. And a lot of times I have to be a little quicker. And THC tends to slow me down quite a bit.
Even the variety that is supposed to help you with focus. And they
Right.
literally will tell you that at a dispensary.
Yeah. So it really does depend on what I'm doing for the day. Like if it was a Saturday and I was just gonna be out playing around outside or something like that, I might want some sort of a sativa with more of an energizing effect versus something that's more indica leaning. But I feel like there's so many hybrids right now. There's some types of cannabis or strains or cultivars is the fancy term, that for me it might make me really sleepy versus somebody else who tries it, it might make them really energetic.
Okay. Because what
um
I'm trying to do here is like give people like a simple, straightforward, like place to start. But what it sounds like is that you can go in a certain direction, but it is really so dependent per person
yes,
that it does require some experimentation to
a
start.
little bit, yes. And it is nice to have somebody that can answer those questions and help guide you. And it is really truly like a journey, and everybody's journey is different. It is nice to have somebody helping you along that path. I feel like if I had somebody helping me, I might have gotten where I am now a lot sooner.
Tell
That
us
makes
about that. Like from that moment, you had the gummy in Colorado and had the 8 hours of blissful sleep for your first time. And Lord knows how long did it take you on your journey with plant medicine for you to regain your health?
It did take me probably a couple of years, I would say, just because I was so afraid of talking about it. And I didn't really know who else to talk to other than my therapist. And she was very supportive
So
throughout the
you
whole.
were going at it on your own. And
Right.
if you had had someone like you, do you
Right.
feel you would have been restored to good health much faster?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's also nice to have a safe space to feel like you can talk about those things.
So, how, as a mom, how do you introduce this so it doesn't become some weird, like, secret thing mom is doing? Right? How do you introduce this in a way in your home that is, I don't know, opens up the conversation and takes away the stigma from it, but while also being responsible in not promoting it to get high to your kids?
Yeah, yeah. I think that first of all, they really did see me trying to come up with a way to deal with all of my health issues. I was trying all of these different things and nothing was working, and I wasn't getting better. And then they saw me when I started using plant medicine, it was a noticeable change. So I think just knowing that how much I had been struggling and seeing how much better I was because of it, that perspective really helped for them to see that. And I think it's really one of those things that you just have to have that conversation with your kids and say, this is something that I'm doing because it helps me. It's non-habit forming. It's not something that I want for you to try, but unless you really need it, and then have that conversation. There's so many different opinions on how you can raise your children and what is best for them. And I think that this is a very personal decision. And if my children ever wanted to use cannabis or needed to use cannabis for some health reason, I would be there for them to help guide them through that.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
just fascinating to me why you could go and get a painkiller prescription or a muscle relaxer prescription or even a benzo, like a Xanax or whatever prescription. And no one thinks twice about it. Even I
right.
bet you your parents, if you said, I got my doctor put me on these medications, they wouldn't really think much about it. But then as soon as you say to people, even me, right? Like I would joke about stuff, but I was never really open even on my podcast about that I'm very pro THC until pretty recently. And I
Mhm.
think it's so bizarre. Like, but I was always open about the fact that been on antidepressants. That's okay. But like, I better not say that the Tiff does bong loads and like eats gummies,
It's the
you know,
devil's lettuce.
right? Like therapeutically, I better not say that because maybe I'll lose clients, or maybe my big corporate clients that I have in my other company will go, oh God, Tiffany's working on our projects and are heading up our $500 million marketing strategy while high as fuck. And it's so weird. It's like, you should be more concerned if someone is sitting there loaded on opiates,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Or someone who is not being treated and in immense pain and discomfort and miserable with brain fog and exhaustion. You should be more concerned about that person working for you or on your stuff than someone who's using plant medicine. Like, I don't, why is this such a thing? It's so weird.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I think one of the biggest barriers to people wanting to try it because of that stigma and fear. And for me, it overcame that very quickly because I realized that this is something that worked. And I felt 10 million times better with plant cannabis and plant medicine versus the pills and prescriptions that they were trying to give me.
So if we were to give someone like a rough cheat sheet, because we all heard you, we and get it, there's an experimental phase to do it truly like responsibly. They would need to consult with someone like you, right, and go through that process. But someone who is already a cannabis user and really wants to look at it more therapeutically, there's got to be something you can give us where it's like, hey, maybe start in this direction, right? Would you say start with something that has on the label that it's a hybrid, or is it more about the percentage of THC you would recommend someone starting with?
Yeah, I would certainly not want to steer somebody towards a cultivar that was really, really high in THC. There's certain ones that are generally a little bit lower. With the Ganja program, we assess cannabis. That's part of what we do. And so when we do that, we're looking at like quality. There's different attributes. So taste, the smell, the color of it, how it's grown. We're looking at all of those things and taking all of that into consideration. And you really want to also have that product tested. So it should have some sort of COA or sort of certificate of authenticity.
And just because it's from a dispensary, even a fancy dispensary, even if it's an expensive, they come in all this amazing packaging, like a fancy glass bottle, and that does not mean that it's good quality. Is that what
Right.
you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So how can one help determine which brand to pick? Because there are so many.
Yeah, there's so many. That's a lot of what I was wanting to learn more about too, because you can get a product and it says it's this one thing, but it's not necessarily always as potent or as it says it is. So that's a certificate of analysis is what's going to give you that information. And it'll tell you, especially if it's flower, it'll tell you the potency or the percentage of THC. I think 20% is a good medium like starting point, and anything lower than that is surely fine too, I would say, but I wouldn't start somebody out at 40% THC.
Now, I have to say this because
I like having all the things. Okay. Very Virgo of me. I love supplies. I have a full plant pharmacy here. I also have a prescription pharmacy here. I like having things on hand. I really should build a bunker because it would be amazing, amazingly stocked. So I have, because this is all I know, right? Until us having this conversation. I wanted to have what is conventionally being sold and available. I want a hybrid and I want a sativa and an indica. And is that really, if someone were to say, like, I want to have like different medicines on hand for different things, is that the baseline of it? Like, if I, for sleep, right?
Mhm.
Am I getting this right? For sleep, it's an indica. If we were to
Yeah.
really simplify it, right?
Yeah. In the couch is how we remember that.
And, oh, thank you. Okay, because it is hard to remember. So for
Yeah.
Tiva, that would be more. I look at it like if I'm doing like content brainstorming or I'm doing writing, or I'm doing like I'm walking. If I want to have something and I'm like doing a long beach walk, then I do that. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, that's about right. Like I said, there's some that may be more dominant towards a sativa effect, or some that are more dominant towards an indica effect. But I like the idea of having a little bit of something for every occasion.
So what is the hybrid though? Because that's where it's confusing. Is it a marketing term that they've come up with? Because then my mind goes, well, why not just always do a hybrid? Now you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it really just depends on that THC versus CBD content.
So
If
a
they're,
hybrid means there's CBD in it too.
yeah, and more so than, yeah.
Or is there CBD in all of them?
Yes and no. Again, it depends on the cultivar, but when we're talking, so it's a different classification, I would say sativa, indica, and hybrid, and then there's type 1, type 2, and type 3. So they're kind of like two different classifications.
It
And
really is so similar to wine because then there's like
yeah.
blends, right? And you can
Uh-huh.
say, oh, I like a blend. Well, what does that mean? There's thousands of different blends. Because, like, when I'm talking to you and interviewing you, I'm like, well, why aren't you just like giving us a straight answer? But it's because there isn't a straight answer. That's why it involves doing some experimenting to
Mhm.
see what works for you and your unique body chemistry, is what I'm really gathering here.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to like what I guess what I was experiencing as far as my health issues and stuff, my main issue was I wasn't sleeping. And because of that, all of this other stuff started happening. I mean, on top of the whole shoulder and neck pain that was going on, then things like my hormones started going out of whack. I mean, I was going into basically menopause in my late
Like
30s.
early menopause.
Yeah, early menopause. And so my doctor was like, "You're too young for this." And I'm like, "I know. What do I do?" And so they give me hormones, which are supposed to be bioidentical. And I'm taking these hormones that they're giving me, and I'm sleeping less than I was before. So now instead of only sleeping maybe 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night, I'm getting more like 4 hours of sleep a night. And I can't function on 5 or 6 hours of sleep, much less four.
And the
So,
priority of somebody, like in your case, and in most people's cases, truly is sleep, because you don't have that. Now we have the cascade effect of the not sleeping.
right. I mean, if you don't get good sleep, you can't do anything. I can't function. I
I'm
know
the
that.
same way.
Yeah,
And
I can't go without sleep.
here's my issue. Okay. This is the inside look over here, what goes on over here. We have lots of reasons why Tiffany might not sleep. I get night terrors. I can't control when they happen. There's lots of things I can do to lessen the chances, but
Mhm.
that's the point of PTSD. You can't always control that. What
Yeah.
works for me is taking, and I know certain brands work better because I've done the experimenting, right? So it's me taking an indica gummy, usually a half, sometimes a full gummy. I don't need a lot in order for that to work.
and when you and I have talked about this offline before, I get munchies like no one's business. And I know not everybody does, but a lot of people do. And I don't have, some people have the restraint of, well, just don't eat, just drink water and then go to bed. Well, I don't have this restraint. Okay. Like I will start eating things, which that's not really good because usually I'll eat something with carbs or sugar, something that turns into sugar, which that in of itself can mess up your sleep or
Right.
cause you to gain weight. But you told me there's also a type of variety that doesn't cause that, right?
Right. Yeah. And I started just experimenting with different products, trying different products, learning more about what goes into different things. And I came across this farmer that was growing a different cultivar that was dominant in a different cannabinoid that I hadn't even heard of, called THCV. And it's a long, complicated name, THCV. And they were saying that it was showing promise with helping people with diabetes. And I was actually pre diabetic because I was also having problems regulating my blood sugar and all these other things because of all of the lack of sleep, right? I mean, I had gained probably 15 pounds. And he was like, you should try this. Not only did I end up going back out of this pre diabetic phase that I was in, I lost at least 15 pounds, maybe more. But it also seemed to really give me a lot of energy.
You were taking this THCV strain more so during the day than at night.
Mhm. Yeah. And I was taking and that was almost too much because I felt like it was making me like not hungry at all. Like I would take a whole dropper of that and I would not eat. So
Interesting. So it's like having almost like an appetite suppressant.
yeah, it was
That
very much like an appetite suppressant. But then I started taking more like a half of a dropper full and it was much better for me. But I continued to have like, I would just eat less. I would have more energy. And then 3 months later, I went back to the doctor, had all of my hormones tested. And the doctor was like, you're fine. You're not pre
um,
diabetic. You're not premenopausal. He was like, you're fine.
and is this variety something that is accessible at like most dispensaries now, or is this hard to find still?
I would say it's getting more and more mainstream, but it's still a lot harder to find. And again, you're going to run into that issue of wanting to make sure it's a quality product. So you really need to ask the questions. I would ask to see COAs at dispensaries. And if they
So
don't,
that's not a weird thing to ask.
no,
Like,
not at all. It should be basically a lab report saying that this product doesn't contain, it contains below the threshold, at least with pesticides and contaminants and that sort of thing. It should have at least give you the percentage of THC versus CBD in that product. With edibles, I like to ask people how their edibles are made. So you're always going to have some sort of extraction done. And so you would want to know how that plant medicine was extracted to make that particular edible. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it.
how can someone determine which vehicle is best for them? I love using analogies and I look at like skincare. There's a serum, there's a lotion, there's a cream, there's a mask, there's an oil, right? That's what goes on in the cannabis world. But how do you know if you're supposed to do? There's all these different things, you guys. There's like wax, dab, tincture. There's all this. How do you know what you're supposed to do? There's so much.
Yeah, there's so many ways and methods, and yeah, I think a lot it's personal preference, but also effect, like how long you're wanting that effect and how quickly you're wanting that to take effect. Tinctures are kind of like I would say that happy medium, and then flower on this one side is like that's the whole plant. You're getting the whole entire plant. So all those different cannabinoids are still there and present, and they're all you're going to consume them all together. But if you're taking a tincture, depending on how that tincture was made, you may be getting only an isolated cannabinoid. You may be getting a full spectrum product. Those are questions you would want to know.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. And
It
this
is.
would make someone like me, who's not really into geeking out on the science of things, would make me go, fuck it, this is too complicated for me. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
doing it. And I think that's unfortunate because it is such a helpful plant. And I don't want anyone walking away from this episode feeling overwhelmed in that way, because this is supposed to do the exact opposite. And that's why it's like, we gave the basics of where to start and then just do some experimentation. And like you said, like go low and slow with it.
Right.
And see what combination ends up working for you. But you didn't have to make this into a business, right? This could have just been like an obsession of yours where you geeked out on it and you made your own edibles at home and it's a hobby, right? And you just are really into it. You didn't have to go as far as like literally making a company out of it. What made you decide I need to make a business out of this?
I think it was for me just wanting to express how important it is to get over your own fears so that you can help yourself, and empowering other people to do the same thing that I did for myself. And I think creating that space where people feel comfortable is really important. And like I said, just being that guide for other people that I didn't have when I was going through this.
Yeah, like someone who has tried all the things, and I know how defeating that can feel because shared openly on here, my own health crisis. I always had body pains. I've always used to say, even at 19, I'd go, I feel like I'm 60 years old. My body always felt so old and tight and tired, even though I always worked out. My hormones were a disaster from being on consecutive birth control since I was 15. And I've truly tried everything. I must have spent at least $500,000 if we add it all up on all the different things. And I'm not saying I don't use some of those tools today and it's not important to experiment and see how those can help. But if I had had someone that really looked at what was going on and was able to better direct and guide me on this plant medicine, on where to start, it would have shaved off so much time for me and, quite frankly, money. Because a lot of these fucking supplements, and I'm not saying there aren't some good quality supplements, I take some of them, but a lot of them you just piss out. A lot of them really don't do anything, or they take so long to work. And like, I got to tell you, I don't have 6 months to feel better.
No.
Right. Like, and I don't feel like we have to wait. And then you go to the doctors, and I'm not saying all doctors. Okay. There's amazing doctors too and practitioners, but many of them, you go to them and say, I don't feel better. Oh, we just have to like adjust this hormone. Oh, it takes time. It's a da 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 da. And it's like, before you know it, 2 years has gone by and you've lost time that you can never get back. And it really pisses me off.
I know. I feel that because I feel like I wasted so much time and so much money, like you, on trying to fix myself and make myself better. And it's very frustrating. And all I really needed was to take a gummy or smoke a joint.
I mean, you must have been equally as relieved, but also pissed.
Yeah.
Colorado, and you woke up that next morning and you slept. What kind of stuff went through your mind?
I was like, what the fuck have I been doing the last 5 years? This is what my body needs. And that from that point on, I was done with everything else.
The other thing that gave me the feeling of, like you're saying, when you woke up the next morning after the gummy, is doing body work, which is why I love you talking about incorporating yoga into it, and that the movement and helping release just all the stored trauma and tension.
because you taking even a perfect recipe of CBD and THC, but your ass is sitting on the couch all the time, I don't think it would be as effective.
No, no. And that is something that I like to incorporate into everything else, is making sure there's some sort of daily movement or activity. And it can be something really small and it can be very short lived, but you got to do something.
So I would say like a good place for you to start getting like some more knowledge without being overwhelmed would probably be like following you on your Instagram or TikTok
Yeah, yeah.
at
I like to.
Shell Gangier. So we'll have that link below. Even hearing your story today, people hearing my story, it's like how you heard that one statement from that practitioner. It's like the whole thing of like the body keeps score. Like
Yep.
your body, your brain will lie to you, your heart will lie to you, but your body doesn't lie to you. And
Yeah.
hearing that from someone who has the credentials, the expertise in the area, someone who you respect, and it's coming from a credible source, it's so fucking validating.
It is.
You're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
crazy.
Right.
I'm not like permanently broken. There's something more going on here. It's not just physical.
Yeah.
We've been programmed and taught just to focus on the physical ailments and fix the physical and mend the bones and do, and that's only one component of it.
There's so many other different aspects to healing other than just taking a pill. That's like putting a band-aid on a lot of things. And I'm not faulting anybody for taking pharmaceuticals for any reason. It's just that there's always that underlying issue or trauma or something that we haven't addressed that is affecting our overall health. Creating more of an awareness about it, I think, is really what the plant helps you do in a way that's not overbearing.
What a beautiful explanation. And thank you so much for sharing everything that you're sharing with us today and everything that you share in other areas. And I think that it's so important for, especially for people who've gone through shit, whether it's a toxic relationship, a traumatic childhood, a health event, whatever it is, to know that there is for sure hope and a different way on the other side. Like it really exists. It's really there because that's what will motivate people. That's what motivated me to continue healing and continue growing and continue processing all this crap. It's because
Mm-hmm.
I knew what was waiting for me on the other side. I trusted it because there's women and men who had gone before me on that journey who were telling me, no, the shit's pretty good over here. The middle part's hard and messy, but it's really good over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're a great example of that. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you
Well,
so much.
thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I just had an epiphany after this episode, which is we do all of these things and get tests and have to do doctor's visits and all these things in order to get prescribed the proper medication and the proper dosage. Why would we treat plant medicine any differently? Why would we wouldn't just go randomly take a pill? I mean, maybe back in my party days or something, but it wouldn't be advised, right? So it's not advised to just go randomly, do plant medicine and expect for it to work as effectively as it could for you, which is exactly why Shelley's created this beautiful business and consultancy. So all of that information is down in the show notes and in the description here on YouTube. You can DM her on Instagram in order to set up a consult with her. And yes, they're paid consults so that you can get the proper direction and guidance to be able to have the best plant protocol and be pointed in the best direction in order for you to get the best results. We do this with so many areas of our life. We do it with fitness. That's why you guys come to me for business. Yeah, you can go do a bunch of trial and error, but you're going to waste a lot of time and money in the meantime. So you know what to do. Wishing you great health, wealth, and worth as always. Love you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.